Welcome to Code with Woody. I am extremely excited to start my first video of this channel and I hope you like it. I will talk about web workers. Let's start. You can check the content of this video in the description so you can jump between the sections without waiting. So what they are, the web workers? Basically, they are the only way you can achieve parallelism in JavaScript. They are basically like just a simple JavaScript file. You can use also like TypeScript if you want and then transpile it using Webpack. And they are part of the web API, therefore you can start using them from scratch without having to install any third party or any library. Actually, web workers are not a new thing. They were already introduced by Eric Bidelman in 2010, so it's already 10 years, but we were not really using them, right? Basically what he says is that people is using functions like set timeout, set interval, XML, HTTP request, and even handlers, but they are not really doing concurrent programming. They are just simply like running asynchronously on the main thread, which is not really concurrent programming. So how they work? They basically just post messages between the main thread and the web worker, and like they live in another context than the global one, so they don't have access like to the DOM, so you cannot manipulate the DOM within a web worker. So you simply create a web worker using the constructor, specifying the file name that contains the code of the web worker, and then you can simply, like for example in this case, listen for changes on some inputs and then posting the messages with the values. On the web worker side, you simply listen for the message and then receive it and compute it. So finally, you can simply post the message back to the main thread. On the UI thread, you simply like receive also like the result. They have a simple image how they interact between the main thread and the web worker. And you can also like terminate and clean the memory when you don't use it anymore. Compatibility. So like we can be lucky because like web workers are compatible almost on all browsers, basically all that are mostly used. Only like few are not really compatible, like is Opera Mini, which is 0.8% of the users. Internet Explorer 6 to 9 also. Yeah, well, Internet Explorer. Yeah, so as I said, like the web workers have different global scope. What does this mean? They have access like to different attributes, different objects that you have like in the browser, in the main thread. And like the basic things is you have like a pointer to the worker itself. You have access to a location object that contains basically the domain information and the path, and a navigator that contains the information about the browser you are using, the language of the user, and some more information. So we basically have two types of web workers. Okay, we have the dedicated worker. That was the example I showed before, like simply from the main thread you post messages to the web worker. And there you also have a shared worker that works a bit differently, and like basically the shared worker is accessible by multiple scripts. So multiple scripts can access the same worker. We will see more examples later in another video to show like the difference. So basically the benefits of web workers are that expensive computation don't block the main thread. The user will not feel like there is something blocking the UI. He cannot move the mouse because it's extremely like annoying when you cannot move the mouse. I always get so angry. And like if you have multiple CPUs, like imagine you have the AMD Ryzen Threadripper with 64 cores, probably not, but if you have it, you can like wow, do magic thing. Imagine if you have web workers, you can perform like amazing things. You know, you can really use that 64 cores and not just one. So when to use a web worker? Well, if you have expensive computation, expensive mathematical functions, use web worker. If you want to make image, audio processing, use web worker. If you want to have autosave feature, like every time, imagine you have like a Photoshop online and you want to every second like save the status and send it to the server, also do it in a web worker. So you will not pollute the main thread, you know, so you will have a clean main thread. So any background task that the user hasn't asked for, you should use web worker, okay? Like, yeah, like for small things, you will not use web worker, but for more consistent, like computation, yeah, you will use web worker. So thank you very much for listening. This was just a theory video, just an introduction, like to have like an idea about what is a web worker, why would I use it. And the next video I will make will be more coding.